Welcome back, Trippers. So now that we've got our hybrid inverter all up and running in grid type mode, we really need to utilize the hybrid function of the inverter. What that means is to connect some batteries to it. Now, to do that, what we need to do is store our batteries somewhere. This room here is just far too small to store batteries. The rest of the house, there's just no room to have a rack of batteries or a box of batteries or anything like that. So what we need to do is come up with another option. The best option that I can kind of think about is utilize the space outside this room or outside on the grass area. It's only a couple of meters away from the hybrid inverter, so it's nice and short. You can possibly see the window beside me, and I'll show you some other outdoor shots in a second. But what we'll need to do is create some kind of outdoor shed or battery box to store the batteries in, short cable run inside, have it so that it's watertight. Obviously that's a very important thing, but also looks as well. That's our front door, that's right next to that area, so it can't just be this big eyesore. So we need to kind of tick a few boxes to be able to get this part underway. So let's have a look at some ideas on the computer around what we can kind of create and what we can come up with, and then we'll go from there. So I thought I'd bring a photo up of the outside of the house in paint to make it really easy to play with and talk to you about it. So what we've got here is the outdoor. This is our main door to the house, so it's our front door with our stairs. Most people walk up the driveway here, which means that this part here is kind of an eyesore if we put something that stands out. So we need to be very careful about what we choose to use as a battery box, as well as how it's designed and how it looks, given that it's our front door. This room here that we were in a second ago when we were filming is the laundry, and that's where the inverter is. So it's against the wall in here. So this room here obviously isn't very big, but that's where the inverter is and all our power connections and fuse boards and bits and pieces. So what we can do is we can easily create a box, a hole in the floor here. The house is lifted off the ground, so we can easily get in through here and be able to run the cabling that we need back up to the inverter. So it's nice and simple, and that's why kind of this area is the best place to put a shed or a battery storage box or anything like that. It just makes sense because it's so close to the inverter. Now this obviously has some problems in this area, which is we've got this drainage here. The grass slopes on a downhill slope. We've got some toilet plumbing that comes out the side of the house, and these things create a whole bunch of issues. So when I first started looking at things for sheds and things, I was looking at the ideas that Peter had on HP Powerwall, and I kind of looked at a shed like this. Now this would obviously stand out because it very much looks like a garden shed, and having a garden shed next to our front door on the front part of our house when our garden area is kind of at the back of the house would kind of stand out quite a bit. The other problem with this is that, as you can see here, it needs a flat pad to sit on. So this would sit on a concrete base, or it will sit on a gravel pad or a wooden structure, but it needs to sit on something. So whether you choose this option here or any other shed looking thing, it all needs to sit on a flat surface. If we come back to the shed here, which was kind of my initial idea, apart from it standing out, the problem is the height. It would be way too tall. It would end up covering our window here, which would be a bit of a problem and would make it stand out even more. All the sheds like this, or smaller or wider, they all seem to have the same height, which is just under 2 meters high. Which would obviously come up to our window frame here and stand out. The second problem is, and the most important problem is why we can't use a shed like this, is because we've got this drainage in here. And this needs to sit flat, and the only way that this will look good, or any good, even if we change the color of this to, I don't know, grey or something dark, is it would have to sit against the house. Now it can't sit against the house because of all this pipe work and this thing down the bottom. If I bring up a closer photo, you see here that this thing here sits out by about 300 mil off the side of the house. We've also got this pipe work that sits out 150 mil or whatever it is, and it means that the shed would actually, if we use that shed, it would end up having to sit like this, and it would stand out being a shed kind of in the middle of the grass. It would look completely awful. The other thing we could possibly do is put the shed here and then somehow cut the back of the shed out to be able to fit this, but that would be awful within the shed, because you'd have to have the plumbing somehow coming in here. You don't want, if it overflowed, it would all overflow into the bottom of your shed. Completely pointless. The only way around that, to use this type of a shed, however, because this is the cheapest, for example, idea, is on this photo here, is to build some kind of a wooden box that would sit up here, and it would have some legs, and that way you would end up building a framed box that would be your structure to hold the, I'll just quickly draw this, there we go, to hold your shed on, or up off the ground. That would allow it high enough to be able to be flat against the house. The problem with that, though, is that the shed could only ever be this wide, because you need to fit within this plumbing here. So it's really not the best idea to use that kind of a shed design. This is kind of the same design, but you'd have to customize it. The other thing I thought about doing was using a shed design, a box like this. This is quite a fancy box. It's the lid lifts up, the sides open out, which is really quite nice. It would sit under the window frame, it would sit in here. Again, you'd have to build some kind of a box like I've just drawn to sit it all on, but it would also work. The problem with this, however, is it doesn't really allow for much flexibility going forwards, because if we were to create a box or build a box or buy a box, we really don't just need it for now, we need it for whatever batteries we change to later on. Right now the 18650s, who knows, we might get into some EV batteries or anything like that, and we really need to be able to put those things somewhere. So the last thing we want to do is build a box that's going to be too small for long term, so we need something bigger. Something bigger like this would be fantastic. That way we can have room for 18650s, and we can have a whole bunch of room for other things here. That would be great. However, it's not going to sit flat on the ground, so we need to come up with some other idea. So with this idea here in mind, what I did was I started drawing some ideas around how we could get around the problem of this drainage area here, as well as this pipe, and have it flat against the house. So let's have a look at what I've done. So this is kind of what I came up with. It's a box that's the same height as just under the window frame. It's also as wide as it'll fit between the deck and that pipe that came down the wall. And it would mean that the main door on it would open out, and we'd have some room. We've got some vent holes on the side. We've also got a sloped roof, so it slopes forward, where all those other boxes, or most of the other boxes, especially if you buy them from your local hardware store, all slope towards the back. We can set up the height to make sure it sits under the window frame. I've drawn some stilts that it sits on. They're not very big in this photo, but you can kind of see what I mean. And looking at this, you can kind of get a bit of an idea around what I was thinking. Now, this was my initial idea. I've got some vent holes on the back. The idea around this is that the air would flow up and out. As any warm air gets in, it will flow out, and it will kind of automatically suck air from the bottom. But remembering that batteries don't heat up much when there's no other electronics in here, this is only to store the batteries. So this was my first attempt and my first idea around creating some kind of an idea like this, but actually something that would work and something that's got some stilts on it. Now, what I ended up doing was taking it to the next level, because what we did was we started to build this like this, and then I realized that the problem with this unit here is that we would have to put the rack to hold the batteries dead in the center, or it's either off to one side or dead in the center. The problem with that, though, is that we end up with this wasted space between the left and the right areas, because the big rack, for example, would sit in the middle to hold all the batteries, and there would be all this empty space either side. So, and the idea about this size here would be obviously the deck on this side, and we've got the drain pipe on this other side. So I really needed to come up with another idea, which I did. The final idea was this one here. So we've got the same box structure in the middle. The only difference is we've added a little bit onto it on the side, so that way our door will open out. We'd have this initial empty space in the middle, but as we come around, we end up having pretty much another box unit in here, which allows us to put a rack unit, and that'll mean that all the batteries will be able to slide in through here, and that'll make it nice and easy to be able to pull them back out, because obviously you slide the batteries in, they also need to slide straight back out again, and you need space here to be able to push them in and out. The other idea around this is that we've got all our 18650s in this area here. That means later on we get to some other types of batteries, for example, and we can put those all along here. We can stack them up this side, we can potentially stack them up this wall here, and maybe if we get into some EV batteries, then they could also be in this box here. Now obviously this box again is on stilts, so that we can, or it's got legs, so that it's high enough to be able to fit over the plumbing work. Now to make this longer, remember we've got this pipe that runs down the wall here for the toilet, and we've got our deck here. To make it longer, what I had to do was we changed the design slightly so that now it's got this area that's cut out. The cut out area means that the pipe from that toilet could come out on the side of it, and that we can still get the overall length of the box that we need to be able to make it a usable box for long term, not just the short term. Now what I've done is I've also got a fan in here, so this is a vent with a fan on the other side of it, and as we keep going around you'll see that I've still got the vents, 2 vents at the bottom, 2 vents at the top, a vent at the top, vent at the bottom on that side. As we keep going around you'll see that we've got, this is the vent that goes out the back, so there'll be a fan on this one. There's a vent at the bottom here. So I've tried to come up with as many options of vents as possible, and each vent will have some mesh on it to make sure there's no bugs that can go in. Now the other thing, because we also want it to be obviously watertight, and we don't want bugs getting in here either. So that kind of gives you a good idea about what I kind of came up with, and I ended up drawing this after kind of getting the tools out and some wood, but that'll come in a later video. But this kind of really shows you the idea and design that I kind of came up with to be able to get a box that's similar to what we have here, but also functional in the way that we can use it for our situation. So what I'll do is I'll show you one more photo, this against the house. So this is kind of how it would look. The photo is not exactly aligned correctly, but you kind of get the idea. So we've been able to manage to keep it under the height of the window, which is good. We've kept it, it's actually a bit closer to the deck than it shows in this photo, but the angles aren't perfect in this photo. I've just kind of put one thing on top of another, but you kind of get the idea. The other thing, the most important thing about this photo, however, is that you can see that this area here where that pipe goes out is the indented part on the box, so that way it fits exactly where it needs to fit. So you kind of really get an idea about why we needed to customize, or why we need to customize a box, because an off-the-shelf box just won't work for our situation in our house. Any other box for maybe your own ideas and plans, if you're going to build an outdoor box, you know, you could use a design like this. That would be absolutely fine. Now on this, the water would run off on the front. It's got a slight overlap on this side. The water will flow off, and we've got all the vents and bits and pieces in place, and it's high enough off the ground to be able to fit that drainage pipe that's well, you can't actually see in this photo, unfortunately, because I've covered it up. It's back here. But either way, you kind of get the idea about what we need to come up with to be able to, and build, to be able to store our batteries. And yeah, this is going to easily store our 18650s, but also be able to create some storage space later down the track with other types of batteries. The key thing is we needed to make this so that it's not too much of an eyesore and it's flat against the house. So really we'll end up painting this white to make it try and blend in as much as possible. But it's still going to stand out a little bit. There's nothing we can really do about that, but at least we can kind of do what we need to by a customized box rather than buying something off the shelf. And yeah, making it as waterproof as possible is obviously very important. So yeah, that's kind of how it looks. So now that we've got a bit of a plan on what we need to create, the next part of the video, or the next video, is going to be the build. So subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, thumbs up if you like this video. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks again for watching.